Okay, Congressman Huffle, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, Justin, thank you. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the third annual State of Civic Education in Pennsylvania. The PA Civics and the Committee of 70 and all of our partners are joining together to present this program, and we're very glad you're part of it. We'd like to touch on some important topics today. Act 35, whether it needs and how it could be improved. The whole issue of teacher development, better resources, more training for teachers to teach civics, the question of our state standards, which are pretty non-existent regarding civics education. So we have a lot to talk about. But first and foremost, we are delighted that Governor Shapiro is joining us. We know from his advocacy, his public comments, his budget priorities, his budget fights, that Josh Shapiro cares very deeply about education in Pennsylvania. And he's here today because he obviously cares about civics education. So we're delighted, Governor, you honor us, and thank you. The floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Congressman Huffle. It's wonderful to be with you and with Congressman Gerlach, who I know we'll hear from in just a moment. Let me just say, first off, I apologize for being in the back of a car. My schedule changed and I'm running around, but I did not want to miss this. I think this is a really important conversation, and I'm grateful to you, Joe and Jim, for your willingness to engage in civics and try and make sure that we are promoting it and fostering it. You are correct. I've tried to make education a central focus of my time as governor. A few weeks after I was sworn in, the courts ruled that our system of funding our schools is unconstitutional, both because it lacked investment and also that investment wasn't being driven out to the districts that needed it most. We brought Democrats and Republicans together and made historic investments in each of my first two budgets. We're going to continue to try and do the same going forward in this next budget. I'm not going to focus on the bigger picture of education, but I do want you to know just how critically important I think it is to give every single child that wonderful foundation of a public education. Now, it matters not just that we fund our schools, but what happens in those schools. And I think a central thing that we've got to focus on is teaching our students more about civics and more about how to be discerning about what they read and what they take in on social media and how that helps them evolve as citizens. I recognize that every election cycle we talk about civics and sort of measure your engagement based upon whether or not you go to the polls to vote. But I think so much of what we need to be focused on to prepare people to vote is how to make sure they understand our history, how to make sure they understand our institutions, how to make sure that they understand the incredibly important role that each of those things play and how we can feed it to them in both a digestible way and in a way that isn't trying to put our finger on the scale of, left-leaning positions, right-leaning positions, Democratic values, Republican values, but instead focus on American values and teach our young people to be engaged in their communities and to do so in a way that helps benefit all of us through their participation in the process. We've done a few concrete things to help foster that. Obviously, funding education is critically important to making sure that there's more opportunity for civics education. We've also made sure to have more digital literacy component to what our teachers are teaching to ensure that when students are digesting information online, that they're digesting factual information. We're not seeking to tell children what they should think or how they should think, but we do want to make sure that they're getting fact and being able to discern that from fiction. In addition to that, we think it's really important that we have greater depth on some important lessons from history that heretofore we have not taught very well, I believe, in our schools. One example of that is a new toolkit that we have made available to teachers to teach the Holocaust, something that we think is critically important that we've not done a very good job of that in Pennsylvania. That toolkit is now available. Another example is making sure students today learn the lessons of 9/11. I signed a law a few months ago, making sure that we not only have a moment of silence on 9/11, but that we have more curriculum available to teachers to be able to teach 9/11. I think it is very important, as I know Joe, Jim, we were there for 9/11. We remember 9/11. And just as importantly, we remember September 12th and how this nation came together on September 12th. I think it is really important that young people understand that and that teachers teach it. And so those are just a few examples of where we've tried to make not only investments in terms of dollars and cents, but investments in terms of toolkits and curriculum that is needed. We've got a long way to go on this, and this is a passion, a focus of mine. And so I really just want to end by saying thank you. Thank you to both the congressmen who are here, who after their time of service in the United States House of Representatives have continued to stay engaged, have continued to remain in the game, not just on the sidelines, and have continued to think about the next generation and how they're going to pick up the baton of leadership and be more civically engaged. And to me, it all starts in the classrooms. And I'm grateful to you two gentlemen for convening us. And I mean this with respect to both of you. I'm more grateful to all the teachers who are here who do this work every single day, as I know you are as well. So with that, I'll turn it to Congressman Gerlach, and I want to say thank you very much to both of you for inviting me here today and for convening this important conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Governor. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us today and for the taking the time out. You're really busy, as we all know, from all the newspaper accounts day to day. You're all over the Commonwealth working on a wide variety of issues to better the Commonwealth. We appreciate that. So thanks for taking time out of your day to be with us today. And certainly your thank you to all the teachers that are working every single day to educate our children is so critically important. And so thank you for those kind words. We appreciate it much. Okay. I'm going to move real quickly, and I do apologize because I'm going to be maybe coughing a little bit. I got this spring cough that I get every year, so I apologize to everybody on the line, but I will try to run through very quickly some slides so everybody on our call today has a good understanding of who Pennsylvania Civics is and what work we're undertaking to try to promote civics education across the Commonwealth. And then we're so fortunate to have two leading state legislators also with us today, State Senator Dave Argall from the 29th Senatorial District and State Representative Tim Brennan, also of the 29th State House District, who have been great partners with us and have really strong interest in civics education across Pennsylvania. And so we're very fortunate to have them join us today as well to be part of a discussion about what's going on with civics in Pennsylvania. But very quickly, let me run through some slides if I can, just to give everybody on the call here today, particularly those of you that are out there in the real world, out there on the front lines of civic education, letting you know what we're up to and trying to allow us to form better bonds with you, better understanding with you, and eventually us help you with your resources and your development as you engage with our children across the schools of Pennsylvania. PA Civics started as a coalition a few years back of about 4 or 5 different nonprofit organizations. We're now up to 22 different organizations. We're a coalition that want to promote civics education across Pennsylvania. We started with trying to understand the impact of Act 35 when it first was enacted by Governor Wolf. And since then, what's been happening with Act 35 relative to civic assessments that have been undertaken in the schools across Pennsylvania based upon that mandate. And then more importantly, learn from the teachers on the ground, excuse me, what they are experiencing, both in terms of that Act 35 mandate, but also just more generally, what are they experiencing and what kind of resources do they need to do better with civics education in Pennsylvania. So our mission is to understand Act 35, work with policymakers, excuse me, to improve Act 35, and certainly work with our teachers, our educators in giving you more opportunities of development, resources, etc., so you can do a great job in the classroom. Former Congressman Joe Hoffel and I co-chair the organization, and here's a good list of the different organizations that are our partners, everything from former members of Congress, Committee of 70, Pennsylvania Bar Association, Pennsylvania Manufacturer Association. I won't name them all, but a great group of organizations. And I want to give a special shout out as well to our Committee of 70 partner who really is our administrative arm for PA Civics, and particularly at the start of this call, you saw Justin. He is doing a wonderful job leading us as we do our work throughout the year. But a great group of organizations, and we all want to come together to fulfill the mission, excuse me, of PA Civics. This is Civic Learning Week in Pennsylvania. If you visit pacivics.org and look up our event calendar, you'll see all the other partnering organizations that have events going on across the Commonwealth, and they might be near you or they might be of great interest to you. So take a look at that if you would and get more information about what they are doing. We believe civics education, as I'm sure you do as educators, really are based on three pillars: knowledge, understanding our history, our structure of government, and then taking that information and developing skills in terms of interacting with your fellow students, with those in your community, to try to understand problems and issues. And then the third pillar, of course, is taking that knowledge and taking those skills and going out and engaging in active forms of behavior that will address those problems, address those issues in your community, and thereby be very active, engaged citizens in your community. So those are the pillars of civic education that we'd like to see built on as we work on civics education in Pennsylvania. We, as I say, have bipartisan support. We've had a couple teachers forums already and have had great feedback from teachers across Pennsylvania about what they're experiencing, not only with regard to Act 35 generally in terms of the assessment that they're giving at whatever a grade level they've decided to do that at their school, but also we've come to understand some of the resource issues and resource needs that they have, and so we want to keep working with educators across the state and helping with that. We also know that Act 35 has some limitations. Certainly the act itself leaves it up to the schools to decide what assessment to use, what assessment instrument to use. Some make up their own assessment tools. Some just use the Citizenship and Immigration Services test. Some give it in give it in 7th grade, some in 9th grade, some in 12th grade. There's no real uniformity and consistency across the state as to when the test and the assessment's given. We like to understand that better. What does that mean in terms of an assessment given to a 7th grader versus a 12th grader in terms of the skills they may or may not have? And so we want to understand that better. But we do have the desire to give resources to all of our teachers. And as you probably know, as a civics teacher, PD does have its own Act 35 civics toolkit that you can access, but we want to build on that and through our partners continue to provide more and more tools and resources as you develop, regardless of what grade you're teaching and you're doing civics, the kinds of resources that you can really put together good programming with your students. So we want to keep working on that based on Act 35. As I say, we've had a couple years of data now. We talked to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Most schools are using a locally created test rather than that citizenship and immigration test. And the majority seem to be administering that in the 11th or 12th grade. But as you know, Act 35 allows you to do it 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and of course, 11th or 12th grade. Schools report that 85% or more students pass. But again, without having a clear understanding of the assessment tool itself that's being used, how it's being graded, what does quote unquote pass mean? We're not real clear on that, and we should try to develop better understanding of that as we look to how civics is being implemented across the Commonwealth. And because of the Act 35 mandate, PDE doesn't see itself as being empowered to do much more to engage with schools across the state with Act 35. And so they're not collecting the assessments themselves. So we don't have a lot of examples of what these assessments are looking like, these tools are looking like, but we'd like to develop a better understanding of that so we can then compare and contrast to see who's using what types of assessment tools And what does that really test ultimately in terms of understanding how civically educated a particular student might be at his or her grade level? So we want to keep building on that information gathering. And so as we've talked to teachers across the Commonwealth and in the teacher forums we've done, we've heard pros and cons. The pros are they like the fact that they can develop their civics education programming at the local level, which is better than nothing, as they said to us. And it's a great starting point for them locally to build a program out that they want to have for their particular school and their students, and it's not costly to administer it necessarily at that local level. But the cons are being reported as there's no real standardization across the Commonwealth. What somebody's doing in the city of Philadelphia school district might look totally different than what they're doing in Clarion. What somebody's doing in Wilkes-Barre looks totally different than what somebody's doing in Upper St. Clair. And so there's no standardization. And there's no real clear goals for student outcomes, and there's no real tie to those programs with the three pillars and making sure a student ultimately, when graduating at 12th grade level, does have a sufficient level, proficient level of knowledge, skills, and the ability to take action. And so that overall lack of clear standards being implemented through very specific outcomes and the lack of curricular support across all of our schools is something been identified by our teachers and what we need to work on therefore. So a lot of good feedback. We've also seen the 2021 Fordham Institute study that was not a very good report card for Pennsylvania, us being assigned an F in terms of the quality and rigor and organization of both our civics and U.S. history standards. Now, we all recognize that analyses and reports may not be exactly accurate, but that's certainly not in this Institute report, not where we want to be. And so we need to be working all together in terms of the rigor and the quality and the organization of both our civics and U.S. History standards. And so that's something we want to work with our teachers on and our educational professors, professionals in the coming next few years. So we have a lot of good work to undertake. And so we as PA Civics want to continue to assess the quality and effectiveness of civics in Pennsylvania. We want to examine and improve our standards statewide. We want to, of course, work with you with resources and development. And of course, we want to expand our partnerships and our stakeholder relationships as a coalition. So we're going to be doing all that, and it all, at the end of the day, starts and stops with our educators in our schools every single day, and that's why we want to work with you. So with all that as background, I think I am get to kick off this whole affair with introducing two of our legislators. I'm going to turn it back to my co-chair, Joe Hoffel, to kick that process off. And again, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that summary. And yeah, now we're turning to a legislators panel for 15 or 20 minutes. We're delighted to be joined today by Senator Dave Argall, who serves on the Senate Education Committee and is the chair of the Majority Policy Committee in the Senate, and by Representative Tim Brennan. We've been describing Tim as an emerging champion on this issue. I think as of today, Tim, we can say you have emerged. You are leading the fight in the House, and that's a great thing. Gentlemen, let me start with Senator Argall. You were in the Senate in 2018 when Act 35 passed. We'd be very interested for your summary of what you were expecting the act to do, whether you're satisfied with what's happened. A little background and your personal views on that would be very interesting.
Well, the act faced a fair number of hurdles at that point, and all of those hurdles, I think, continue to exist. Whether I'm at one of my town hall meetings in the 3 counties that I represent, or in my former role teaching public policy at a number of colleges and universities, the fundamental concern with budgeting is we always want the agencies to do more and more, but we don't want to give them any extra money. And we want to make sure that in terms of education, we constantly hear that we can't afford to do any more unfunded mandates. And if you ask a lot of the stakeholders, they're not even fond of the funded mandates. And while I think a lot of us wanted to see more happening with civics education, there was the constant pushback about make the day longer. We can't spend less time on the STEM subjects, and so you can see the minefield I think that we're walking through. That in the broad perspective, everyone agrees we ought to do more, we ought to do better. Although I will say, when I asked that question last year to the Secretary of Education during the appropriations hearing, the Department of Education saw no need at that point to change the law. And so I think a lot of us are looking for that magic bullet to see how exactly we can improve the process to help, the kids in the 6th grade, the 7th grade, the 8th grade. So, they know the difference between the federal government and the state government, and they know I'm not the judge, I'm a senator, and they certainly don't think I'm the governor, but there's a lot of confusion, and not just with the kids, but with their parents and their grandparents as well. And so I really applaud anyone who's willing to take this issue on. I think from day one, we understood the need and we understood the challenge that it's not going to be easy.
Senator, thank you. I must say I feel at somewhat of a disadvantage with you and the governor. I'm just sitting here in my bedroom. You guys are motoring around the Commonwealth. Very impressive that we can have this mobile conversation. Thank you for those initial comments. Representative Brennan, welcome. We'd, I think, all be interested to know as opening what got you interested in civics and the sorts of things that you'd like to pursue in this area. So please let us know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can almost pinpoint to a moment growing up as a kid, walking around back when they had Walden bookstores, and I was maybe 13 or 14 years old, and I picked up a book on the civil rights struggle, and I got to the page that showed Emmett Till in the casket, and I realized that was wrong, and that was preventable, and that that there was a string of political actions and a political culture that led to that death. Shortly afterwards, I read Night by Elie Wiesel, and I saw human suffering. I think it's always been sort of, a sense of connection to the idea of moving forward with justice. But I was in a youth leadership program as a kid. After 9/11, I taught terrorism and the Constitution, and I experienced what so many teachers have to go through, going into a high school class, with a whole list of the Federalist Papers, and trying to get the kids to latch on to that. And it was just a volunteer thing while I was in law school. Wanted to make a difference, and it started to sort of crystallize to me the balance in this country between rights and responsibilities and freedom and order. And one of the most crucial responsibilities we have as citizens is civic engagement. And it's not just, as the governor said, I believe, getting up and voting. It's informed citizenship, and that's crisscrossed in the Federalist Papers when you read them. When I got a bit older, I taught Politics 101, and I had this wonderful moment to get to teach a politics class where I went from my intro to politics class, where I had the allegory of the cave, and I told the kids, you got to go find truth and justice, and then moving on to Thoreau, unjust laws exist. Do we obey them? Do we transgress them, or do we endeavor to change them? And then ending with that Emmett Till and telling the kids, like, there's everything's a political action, even inaction, and we should be out there doing things. So I think just recognizing the importance, recognizing the opportunity that you have to make positive change by just getting up and doing it. Growing up, I actually watched Senator Argall. I watched the work that he did over the years in Tamaqua, and it's a chance to change communities. And I've from a young age, I saw that, and I always appreciated the opportunities.
Well, that's terrific. Now, your teaching, was that at the high school level?
I taught the terrorism and the Constitution at the high school level. I taught politics 101 at the community college level.
Oh, great, great. Well, I want to get back to you in a minute to have you talk about your planned study of the effectiveness of Act 35. But let me turn back to the senator, and maybe we can drill down a little bit. What's your current feeling about Act 35? Are you happy with its implementation, or are there changes that you'd like to see? We'd be interested in your thoughts.
I mean, I would like to see us do more. I referenced all of the, issues that we dealt with 8-9 years ago. None of those issues have gone away. People are still concerned about mandate, whether they're it or not. They're still concerned about, well, if we spend more time on civics, does that somehow mean we're taking from the read structure or the math or the science? And so no one yet has brought me the magic bill that will get us 102 votes where Tim serves in the House, 26 votes, and then in the Senate, and then of course the signature of Governor Shapiro. And so I think what I would encourage you to keep doing is to talk to all of the different groups. I know you've been trying to engage the teachers and the school boards and the principals and the superintendents. My understanding is the chairman of the education committee 2 years ago is that if all of those groups agree, then I think you've got a fighting chance. But if all of those groups are fighting you, good luck. And so again, it's an important cause, but don't for a moment think that this is going to be easy.
Oh, there's a lot of wisdom in what you say, and indeed, we are trying to engage all of these groups. And as you know, we have a legislative working group where we are sitting down with legislative leaders in the leadership of all 4 caucuses and on the education committee in both houses, trying to figure out where the common ground is. And we appreciate your involvement in that. Representative Brennan, let me turn back to you. I know that you have sought some support for a more precise and in-depth study of Act 35 in Pennsylvania. Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, actually, I recently just proposed, I circulated a memo. I don't know if we have the resolution out yet, but it would be a resolution to have the joint state government committee look at, number one, what we're doing in terms of our assessments, the adequacy of the assessments that we've had, based on the stated goals of the Department of Education to have knowledge-based, skills-based, and I guess action-based. And I might have butchered that, but clearly, it's the test that we're having right now is possibly knowledge-based, but certainly I don't see what it does to build skills or actual action. The resolution would also look at some of these other highly functioning states that are acknowledged for their civic education programs and look at them and see how we might be able to apply them in Pennsylvania. One of the things that the governor had mentioned, and I think has come up, I think Congressman Hoffel mentioned as well, this idea of media literacy. Part of that is something that would be looked at to see what other states are doing in terms of media literacy. And then also to try and find some examples of what other folks are doing to have more of a participatory engagement in civics, that action component. I've seen several bills in the House that do things to address this. Brendan Markozik has a bill that provides information to 16-year-olds in advance of elections to start talking to them about who's running and all those other things in anticipation of them registering to vote. There are suggestions of having a certification on your diploma to show that you've done some type of activity that maybe doesn't hold up you graduating, but at least shows that second step and creates some type of incentive to have a more participatory democracy.
And what's the timing on that study?
Well, we have to get it past the House. The memo circulated already. I don't recall if the resolution, the language is already complete. I just don't know if it's been actually introduced yet.
And it has to pass both houses, and then it takes
For my
several votes?
for the study, I think we would just have to get it through a chamber.
Oh, okay. All right. Very good. Senator, let me turn back to you. Do you hear from your constituents or from teachers or from parents about civics, the lack of good civic education or the high quality of it? I mean, is this something that comes up through your constituency?
It does, but I've got to be honest. I mean, when I taught public policy, I used a book by John Kingdon on agenda setting, the idea being very common sense. If you're not on the agenda, you're not going to get discussed. If you don't get discussed, you don't get voted on. If you don't get voted on, it's not going to happen. And so it's not like the crisis we saw long before us in the 1950s when the Soviets put the Sputnik up, and suddenly people were shocked and said, oh, we've got to do more on science and math in the public schools. It's not like the crisis we saw with some of the terrible shootings where people said, well, we need to do more for mental health, and we need to make sure that the front door of the school is locked. So yes, it's an issue, but it's not an issue that is, banging on our door every single day. Got to be honest
Okay.
with that.
Yep. Yeah. No, fair enough. Representative Brennan, how about you? Do you hear from your constituencies or your school teachers?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I have, I mean, just sort of looking at socioeconomics and what people are interested in. This is the 29th is one of the wealthiest House districts in the state. Education levels are exceptionally high. I've worked in a legislative office that has different socioeconomics where things are tighter, and a lot of the legislative function was doing services, but a lot of what I get is really questions about policy, questions about how we're running the government. I get a ton of inquiries about redistricting reform or independence voting in the primary, and so many other of these issues. And I'm constantly going through the cycle of getting back to people individually or coming up with these issues or showing up at these events. But I have an incredible amount of interest in that. And frankly, every time we work on an issue related to civics, almost routinely I'm getting an email back in my newsletters or otherwise, several of them about how important it is.
Okay, great. Let me ask you both one final question. Senator, first to you. You've already identified some of the problem areas, unfunded mandates, the need for accountability, local control issues. On a more positive view, are there areas of agreement between the parties regarding civics that you've picked up? Are there areas we can build upon as we move forward studying Act 35 and perhaps looking for amendments to it?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I do not see any partisan difference on that issue. And I can't say that a lot in Harrisburg on a lot of other issues. And as I think most of the people on this call know, the only way we're going to get anything done is through a bipartisan agreement. We've got a Republican majority in the House. Within a few weeks, in the Senate, we're very likely to have a Democratic majority again in the House, 102, 101, but a majority nonetheless. We, of course, have a very Democratic governor. And so today, to get anything done in Harrisburg, you need both sides. And yeah, this is not one of those issues where both parties should be in mortal combat.
Well, that's good to hear. That's great. Representative Brennan?
In terms of consensus, I think everybody sort of gets the importance of this. I think both sides of the building. I mean, this Act 35 passed 49 votes in the Senate, a good 260, 270 in the House. So I think everyone gets to the the importance of it. I think on education issues, there's always a little bit of a concern about mandating curriculum. I think that is a sort of an impediment. But I think there are things that are universal, you know, that there's no pushback on, like you know, the importance of how the system works, federalism, checks and balances, you know, the governing docs that we run by. So you know, there are a lot of things we do have. I think that we all care about this, and I think it should be in everyone's interest to have fully functioning citizens. I did look back and I looked at the debate. A lot of the debate for Act 35 dealt with a concern about the amount of testing that's being done. And honestly, frankly, as I've been working on this, I'm only around 3 years, that was in 2018, I haven't heard anyone talk to me about concerns about more testing. So I do think there's a lot that we, I mean, so much is riding on our democracy and functioning, and I think we've all, we'd be blind not to say that we've seen challenges to our democracy. So I think we all have an incentive to try and make this work and do the best we can as public servants.
Very good. Well, Senator Argall and Representative Brennan, thank you so much. This has been a great discussion. Thank you for your time. I know we have 4 outstanding educators who are going to make presentations. Jim, I'm not sure if you're going to moderate that or whether Justin is. Let me turn it back to one of you to talk to our educators.
Yeah, I think Justin and Shannon are going to take that away, right?
Shannon's got it. Yep.
We are, absolutely. Thank you so much for setting us up here. My name is Shannon Salter, and I teach students in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where I'm lucky to be able to teach civics across the curriculum to high school students. I am also the national teacher representative to Educating for American Democracy, which includes being the co-founder of the Teacher Leadership Task Force, where our mantra is no talking about education without educators. So I'm really excited to collaborate with PA Civics, who have so clearly demonstrated that they value and center teacher voice in everything that they are doing and are about to do. And that makes teachers our grand finale here tonight. We have brought together for you a panel of 3 outstanding educators who are going to talk about what civics looks like in the classroom. We've been hearing about what it looks like on the law books and what it looks like when external evaluators look at the Commonwealth and see what we do. But now it's time for us to talk about what Pennsylvania's educators are capable of delivering to our students. And it turns out that we're capable of delivering quite a bit. So before I get into my questions for our educators, and I'm trying to keep a watchful eye on your time here today, could the 3 of you just tell everybody in the room where you are, where you teach, and the grade level and subjects that your students are in? And if you want to start us off.
Hi, I'm Ann Olvera. I teach in Philadelphia Public Schools. I teach at a school called E.M. Stanton School. I teach 5th grade, and I am the advisor for our student government, which is 5th through 8th grade.
Thanks. And how about you, Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Halloran. I am a teacher at Alderdice High School in Pittsburgh Public Schools. Right now I teach AP, US Government and Politics, mostly to 9th graders, and also have a senior level class. And yeah, I can talk about my other stuff later.
Awesome. And Leon, round us out.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Leon Smith. I'm a high school social studies teacher at Haverford High School in Delaware County, right outside of Philadelphia. I teach AP US History to 9th graders, and then I teach AP African American Studies to 10th through 12th grade.
So thank you so much, you 3, for joining us. So we already had mentioned to us that in 2021, Fordham issued a comprehensive state-by-state study evaluating the state of civics and history education nationwide, and the Commonwealth didn't come out looking so good with a grade of F in both civics and history. Can't stress enough, that evaluation has nothing to do with the quality of Pennsylvania's teachers. It was an evaluation of Pennsylvania's systems. And as remarkable as our three guests are today, I know they're going to talk to you a lot about doing the work within the system as it is. And the lack of an accountability measure within the system. We all know, not that we're complaining, that there isn't a keystone exam evaluating civics or social studies. The fact that Pennsylvania's graduation requirement is only 1 semester of US government in order to graduate in the Commonwealth. And that PA Act 35 does impose the opportunity to assess civic learning, but it doesn't create a standard for what that assessment should be, and really only delivers tools to evaluate one of those 3 important pillars, knowledge, but not the skills and disposition that go with it. So we all know that quality civic education has to go beyond mere knowledge, and really that we learn civics by doing civics. So let me ask you all, and we had a conversation ahead of time so I can focus on some gems here. I want to know what it looks like to do civics where you teach. And Anne, if you could start us off, because the fact is that civics is built into the very fabric of the Stanton School. So can you just talk to us about what makes your school a laboratory for civic experience for students?
I like that, a laboratory. That's great. And I think that learning by doing is a great thing that we do at Stanton. We are a K-8 school, and all of the classrooms will start the year with rights and responsibilities. You know, teachers always put their rules up, consequences and rewards, and we have the rights and responsibilities. So you have a right to a safe learning environment, and what responsibility do you have that goes with it. All of our teachers do that at the beginning of the year. So that's embedded into our whole school program. We have a Stanton Bill of Rights, and we have a Stanton Constitution that we worked on 15 years ago, I think is maybe right. 15 years ago, we wrote a constitution. We had Constitution High that's here in Philadelphia that helped us to put that together. And within that constitution, we've built a student government. And so our student government is students who are in 5th through 8th grade. If you're younger, you'll get your turn when you get old enough to vote. And the 5th through 8th graders run for executive branch. And so we've got an executive part of the government. And then we've also got the House of Students. So 3 kids from each 5th through 8th grade will run for House of Students. And then we'll have the Staff Senate, who is also part of the governing body that we have here at school. And they are able to write bills, create things. They will study, they'll go to their constituents and find out what things they want. You know, 5th grade, what did you want to have happen? What are things that you're interested in? 8th grade, what do you want to have? And they come back to our meetings. We meet once a week as the government during the school day. I don't want to talk too long, Shannon, so don't.
We will come back to them, but that's a great start. So literally within the school, you've got 3 branches of government, and students participate not just as those being governed, but as those doing the governing as well. Michelle, you mentioned when we talked that upon graduation, at least one of your alumni came back to your school with proposals, collaborated with the superintendent's office to give students an ongoing voice in not just the building, but the governance of the school district. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. He was actually still at Alderdice when he really pushed for this to happen. He was pretty active at Alderdice. And what he was able to get done was the superintendent's, I'm going to say this right, Student Advisory Council. And so the students meet in school, within the school with it twice a month. And then I believe it's every other month. They come together from different schools in the district and meet with the superintendent and the folks at the board, so that there is some kind of voice in terms of decision-making at the board level, which has been a nice thing. The kids really enjoy it. You know, it's only been a couple of years, so we're kind of waiting to see, you know, what the final result of that is. But I think the kids are really excited to have some of a voice in what's happening in the district.
Thank you. That's great. And Allentown has something similar. I know that across the Commonwealth, there are some, but it's not universal, that students are finding seats, non-voting seats on school boards, principal advisory committees, superintendent advisory committees as well. Leon, when we were talking, so our representatives today already talked to us about the importance of the bipartisan nature of civic education and the fact that it is not a partisan value to want our students to practice and be prepared to emerge into adult civic life, ready to participate. And at your school, you mentioned that civics doesn't stop in the classroom, but in fact, your extracurricular activities are really important part of preparing students for civic life in a very bipartisan way. Can you talk to us about how your voter registration drives happen?
Yeah, so at our high school, we have a Young Democrats Club. We have a Future Republicans Club, and every year they work together and collaborate to hold a voter registration drive, and it's been really successful. In 2018, 2019 school year, they are at the gold level, which is 85% or more of eligible seniors. And also they did that in 2019 and 2020. Silver, they got 2021 and 2022 and 22 and 23. So we've really done a great job of really galvanizing the school community around the importance of voting. We also have, class elections as well that start in ninth grade, for the students to really get involved in that process. Our principal is really outspoken and really having the students go with their parents to the polls and to, really stress how important it is to kind of start early. And then we also have elected officials that come to our building and meet with our students as well. So, our students really truly understand the importance of that civic responsibility.
That's awesome. And what Leon was referring to there when he was talking about gold and silver awards is the Governor's Civic Engagement Award. Looks like this. If you keep up with it, eventually you start to fill it up. But at the end today, we will be including information because it is getting time for this year's kickoff. And there's going to be a kickoff event this Friday. So at the end today, if that is not a program you're familiar with, we will be sharing with you information about where to find out about the Governor's Civic Engagement Award, which is a voter registration incentive sponsored by the Governor's office, and also how to register for this Friday's kickoff event so you can learn more about how to get your students involved in that little bit of celebrating the work we are doing in preparing our students to participate in elections. So let's pivot to Act 35 because that's really what we've been focused on today. And I'm curious to know how Act 35 factors into your teaching, how it serves as a target, or does it not really serve as a target when you're designing instruction? And Michelle, I want to start with you. So first of all, the exam that your school uses to comply with Act 35, where did it come from?
So our test was a district design test, and so all of our high schools use the same exam. And so at the end of the year, that's when all civics, AP government, and again, we do government in ninth grade. So all of our kids take it at the end of the year. Act 35 as like an AP government teacher, and I probably shouldn't say it like this. I don't want to say it's an afterthought, but like the AP exam is obviously much more rigorous than the test that the district designed because the kids that are taking the AP are the high flyers and high achievers, and they're going to, do well. And that's probably where Act 35 is kind of interesting to look at, like district wide, or even just within our school in terms of, what do the scores look like and what are we doing to get everybody on the same level playing field and making sure that all of our students are accessing the information in a way that they're getting the information. I mean, I helped to write our civics curriculum years ago, and it's probably outdated, but they're covering the same basic material. It's just AP Gov is getting into a lot more of the detail. But it's just more about like, how do we really engage some of the kids that are disengaged to do well? I mean, and again, I hate to say to do well on a test, but just to make sure that they're, just engaged with the learning and even the community, service part. We're kind of getting that back up and running. We had a pretty robust program years ago, pre-COVID, and we're really working to try to make sure our kids, as the department chair, I'm trying to like talk to my civics teachers. Okay, what are we doing? What can we design so the kids are wanting to do some of these projects and wanting to engage, and how do we draw them in so that everybody's getting access to that information and getting engaged with the community.
And you're in the elementary world, although it's possible that an Act 35 test could be administered in as early as 7th grade. But I know you have, when you are focused on your students' literacy development and their mathematical skills, you're already thinking about those graduation level exams, even as young as your students are, because you've eventually got to help get them there. Are you spending any time when you're thinking of what your students learn in social studies and civics with you, worried about proficiency on the Act 35 assessment, whatever it is that the high schools you feed into are using? Or are there other ways that you gauge your success with students?
I think there's other ways. I think that we aren't looking ahead to that at this point. I have had students like in Stanton, we're a small community, we're a little school, and we have students come back to visit, and a girl who was our vice president came back to school, and she mentioned that she was in a civics class, and she's like answering all the questions. She knew all the answers to these civics questions, and her teacher said, "How do you know all this?" She's like, "Well, I was the vice president of my class." And he's like, "What?" And so she knew all these things. So for me, when I hear a story like that, I'm thinking, she knows this because she did this. She knows all of these things on how government works and how it applies and what you have to do to get something, because she actually did it. So I think that I'm thinking for us, it's more of the doing it to make it seem real for them, and for them to actually vote and actually run for an office and talk to their representative to see what they want from the government. And so we're more there. I think we're not really thinking about a test or something that's coming up. In our regular social studies classes, we have regular civics parts of it, in addition to the other social studies topics that we cover. But I'm thinking for us here at Stanton, it's more of a doing than a reading.
Leon, you introduced yourself as an AP teacher, mostly in the history disciplines within social studies. Governor Shapiro at the beginning challenged us to remember the importance of historical content knowledge and history disciplinary skills in preparing students for civic life. And you spoke to me about that when we spoke last week as well. How, as a history teacher, are you giving students important skills and knowledge that will impact their power in civic life? And what does it look like to assess those things?
Well, I think one of the key things is for them to really be critical consumers of information. I think the governor referred to that as that idea of that digital literacy. And that does not just apply to, kind of social media, but it also applies to many of the sources that we look at in class. So oftentimes we're looking at a particular topic in context, or we're thinking about the person's point of view or the audience. And so I think that as the students really begin to see how that can impact the interpretation of an event or a source, they have a little bit more understanding of how things become less black and white, but more gray, more nuanced. And I think certainly too, when we think about different historical events, we're always tying that in. We're celebrating and commemorating really the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, the Selma March. And, these are things that I bring into my classroom. And I often talk to the students about the power of young people, how throughout history, young people have really been at the heart of change. And as we go through the course, I can see them really becoming very passionate and thinking about, all right, well, here are things that I'm passionate about. What are the steps that I need to take in order to be able to create change in those areas? And so I think it's a matter of providing that context and providing the skills that students would need to be able to interpret the sources and the information that they're going to be encountering. I think those things are going to be important.
I love that. You can't be a change maker in the future if you didn't first learn how change happened in the past and how people like you were the change makers of the past. So I love that. We are running really up against that time, and I did have a couple of other things I want to ask, but in case we run out of time, a couple promises I want to make. So we have all of you registered to be here. We have your contact information, but in a moment, Justin's going to help me out and share a link with all of you to a survey we have asking your opinion on some of the topics that we have been talking about today, because we want this conversation to continue. You heard from Representative Tim Brennan, especially, there is an appetite for some more conversation that will lead to movement around this topic here in the Commonwealth. What do we all, especially the educators among us here, what do we want and what do we think civic education can look like here in the Commonwealth? And how can we ensure that it happens everywhere and not just if you're lucky enough to have a really passionate and motivated teacher in your classroom? And so to help us continue this conversation with each of you, and that includes questions we may not have time to get to in the Q&A, please do us the favor and fill out this survey for us. You can scan the QR code, you can hit that URL, we're going to email it out to you. But the more information you give us, and there are invitations to stay involved in this conversation with us at different levels, because we don't want the Commonwealth talking about civic education without our civic educators. And so this is an invitation for you to stay in touch with us. And I'm gonna take a risk here, and I'm gonna try one more question while we leave that slide up. So I promised you information on that Governor's Civic Engagement Award. Please do, and she confirmed with me she wants all 100 people that are on here to email her to come to this event. So email Diane Gordian at the Secretary of State's office so you can hear about this way to engage your students and create a little bit of an incentive around registering students to vote. And Michelle, I saw a question in the Q&A, and I kind of think your answer to this question might be our great parting thought, which is, I know back in the day when the Keystones first went from being sort of a beta test to a real thing, there was thought that there might eventually be a social studies or civics related one. And a lot of school districts made the move to shift civics from senior year down to 9th grade so that there was the opportunity for students to remediate and take it again if they needed to. And a lot of schools have kept it there. Michelle, your district now used to teach civics only in the 12th grade, and now it has moved down to freshman year. What have been the pros and cons of that move?
So we were actually we had AP Government as a 12th grade elective, but all students have always taken civics in 9th grade. So we've, made that argument for years that it might be more relevant for seniors to have government as they are starting jobs and paying taxes and getting ready to vote and getting ready to go to college and take out student loans and all of those things. The district just hasn't figured out a way to do it yet. Because they seem to like the order that we go in. I just as a quick side note, we did the AP, tested out the AP government class starting 4 years ago in 9th grade. And I was really like hair on fire. This is a bad idea. The high flyers do well on the test. They are really engaged in the class. The flip side to that is they may not have the maturity to really handle some of the tough issues or the understanding of what it means to actually pay taxes and to face some of those more serious issues that the seniors understand a little bit better.
Well, and so maybe a parting thought for all of us, one of the things that Fordham report points out is that Pennsylvania is at the bottom of a lengthy list of states when it comes to not just our standards in civics, but how much civics is required. And in Pennsylvania, it's only half a credit before you graduate that is specifically identified as civics. And maybe the question we should be asking is not, should we do it in 7th grade or 9th grade or 12th grade, but rather, how can we do it in more places and more frequently and spiral it the way we spiral other things in our curriculum so that it's infused, not just in multiple levels of social studies, but across the curriculum, the way literacy is. And so I hope this year becomes a year of conversations for all of us to think of all of the ways and the places that we can come together as teachers like this, have conversations about how to best engage students in civics so that we can perhaps approach America's 250 next year and its kickoff event here in Philadelphia, ready to announce that Pennsylvania is ready to take a leadership role in civic education nationwide and no longer find ourselves at the bottom of the nation's civic report card. Thank you. Oh, look at that. 5 o'clock on the dot. Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over again to our hosts to give you their final thoughts for the evening.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Michelle and Ann and Leon, for your really insightful comments about what you're experiencing every day in your schools and helping teach our students their civic responsibilities. Hopefully, in this short hour, everybody on the call maybe realizes one thing, that not only is civics education driven to some extent through the legislative process and through state government, but it's also driven by the quality of the teachers we have in Pennsylvania and their commitment to really educate our students to be our future citizens. And as Shannon said a little bit earlier, which is so important, we may have some issues around what's called Act 35, and we may have some issues, as Representative Brennan and Senator Argall were talking about, how do we move legislation through the process. What we don't have an issue about in Pennsylvania is great quality teachers. We have terrific teachers all across the Commonwealth that want to teach their students the right history. They want to teach the students how to engage as future leaders. They want to teach students how to really take on issues and solve problems in their communities. So we need to figure out ways to, through the legislative process and through how we undertake civics in Pennsylvania, how to really empower even more our teachers to engage with those students and create those great citizens of the future. So I want to thank the teachers on the line today, both those on the panel as well as those that participated by listening to this presentation. And hopefully you'll undertake that questionnaire and send it back in, because that will help build our teacher network across the state, where we will learn from you, we'll understand what you're experiencing in the classroom, and have that information be used by us to try to also help create better public policy in Pennsylvania around civics education. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Shannon, for leading that important conversation. Joe, Justin, anybody else?
Jim, that was really well said. I want to thank Shannon and our teacher panel, and thanks to everybody on this Zoom call. It was a good hour. Thank you.